Today I'm going to paint a light pink orchid with lots of little pretty details, and it has yellow and orange accents. I'm going to show you how you can paint this flower simply and easily and get really great results. We're going to use Arches paper. You could use a different paper if you want to. So let's get started. I swatched a few pink and purple colors to figure out which pinks I want to use. They are Opera Pink by Daniel Smith, Bright Rose by Hoblin, and the first swatch is a Potter's Pink. Not really pink, but it's a color I'm considering mixing for shadows. And then I've swatched Permanent Rose by Winsor & Newton. You can see how different these hues really are from one another. Winsor & Violet is too strong of a pigment, but I'm going to use it with Potter's Pink to see if it might be good with the shadows. And that's the last color that I'm swatching. It's a mixture of the two. I'm artist Jenny Floravita, and welcome back to my art channel. With a smaller round brush, I'm adding clear water to petal shapes. I'll be painting wet into wet, dropping in colors and letting them fan out expressively. I'm primarily using Bright Rose mixed with some Potter's Pink and a little bit of Winsor Violet in the combination. The little bit of blue is a Winsor & Newton Cobalt Blue. What I want to achieve is a very simple yet expressive color blend for the background. I want the layering to be simple and easy in this piece. The first layer matters because it adds to the contouring of the petals. As these petals are still damp, I can continue to drop in color and move it around with my brush. This makes the round brush the best tool, as you can lift it up and move the paint into soft lines that will feather out. For this part of the tutorial, you're watching me paint in twice the speed. I want the petals to be dry for this second part, and sorry if for a few seconds it's going to be turned. I was filming a short for YouTube here, so that's why the flower's on its side. If you find value in my art tutorials and enjoy watching, please subscribe and hit the bell notification. But I'm using the same size 6 round. I'm going to be adding expressive lines and dots. By holding my brush up, this allows me to use the tip. And if I press downwards, I can make the lines thicker. And by lifting up slightly, it thins out the lines. This is how I vary the widths. And it's also how I'm making the fine little dots. I want there to be a variation, because that's what you see in nature. And you're watching me paint this at 5 times the speed. And I'm making the marks that follow the direction and how I want the petals to curve. This part takes time, and to get all the fine little details and make it just really interesting, it takes a little bit of practice, so you might want to take a piece of scratch watercolor paper and practice some lines and some dots, and practice varying the widths. That'll get you ready to do the detail work. So now I want to paint the interior of the flower, And I'm going to use a little bit of New Gamboge, and that's a Winsor Newton color. It's a very sunny color, and I've had this on my palette for about 6 years. I like to use this in florals a lot. It's a very vibrant hue. And on the inside, I'm following the same process that we did with the first layers, and that's wet into wet for the underpainting. This is after the stamens are dry, because we don't want that nice sunny color to bleed. And with that dry, I'm using Opera Pink Very Saturated. The petal is still damp, so I'm able to bring the saturated part in and it doesn't move far. The edges just soften out a bit. And that's the beauty of working with a damp section. It's not as wet as when the water first went down. And while this center part dries, I'm going to be adding some shadows with a very diluted Winsor Violet and Potter's Pink mix, along with some occasional cobalt blue. I'm using water to fan out my shadows. From here I can add a few extra detail lines that might have softened too much. As I'm used to working on large paintings, even I have to remember that less is better in a small flower tutorial. In college, I took most of the classes in the science illustration program. It was for graduate students, but I was allowed in. The instructor did most of the illustrations for the Monterey Bay Aquarium at the time. She taught us some interesting techniques that she used a lot in painting fish. She taught us about lifting the paint and also using some white gouache or some titanium white to bring back highlights in areas that are just too futzy to keep white in watercolor. And with an orchid, this would be a really great application. In this flower, there are some very soft violet highlights on the petals in dots, and those details can be added by mixing a bit of titanium white to a color. And this just helps the final detail process if you have small areas that really need it. In oil painting, this process is natural. In watercolor, it's used sparingly, and in some cases by watercolor purists, it's kind of frowned upon. But I think back to my science illustration instructor, and she was a phenomenal artist, and she really used the titanium white or the gouache, whatever she was using when she was working with watercolor. She used it to an advantage, so it wasn't a crutch, it was to an advantage. And I think you can see where I'm adding the little bits of white highlights that are kind of supposed to be a little bit of a soft violet. That would be a really good example of using this to an advantage. Would you like to be notified of upcoming online painting workshops and new video releases? If so, visit the link in the comments below. And if you would like to view my original art, visit floravitalights.com. Be inspired, and until we meet again.